We are told that the gravitational pull of the moon alone creates the tides, but this is also wrong. If the moon was 2,160 miles in diameter, and the Earth 8,000 miles in diameter, the Earth would be 87 times larger, and would attract the smaller mass to it, in this case the moon, not the other way. We are told the Earth's stronger gravity keeps the moon in orbit, so, how can the moon's weaker gravity override Earth's gravity at Earth's lowest points, sea level and below sea level? If the magical error-ridden force, called gravity existed, all trees would look like willow trees, and all flowers would wilt in an N shape. But that is for another time. The Earth's tides vary greatly. For example, near the Isle of Wight, there are 4 tides a day. Some beaches have tides, which go out far, while others not so much. The mainstream map of tides is not uniform, and would not be caused by a single body moving harmoniously across from east to west. Thomas Winship, in his book, Zetetic Cosmogony, said, if the moon lifted up the water, it is evident that near the land, the water would be drawn away, and low instead of high tide caused. Again, the velocity and path of the moon are uniform, and it follows that if she exerted any influence on the Earth, that influence could only be a uniform influence. But the tides are not uniform. At Port Natal, the rise and fall is about 6 feet, while at Beira, about 600 miles up the coast, the rise and fall is 26 feet. This effectually settles the matter, that the moon has no influence on the tides. Tides are caused by the gentle and gradual rise and fall of the Earth on the bosom of the mighty deep. In inland lakes, there are no tides, which also proves that the moon cannot attract either the earth or water to cause tides. But the fact that the basin of the lake is on the earth, which rests on the waters of the deep, shows that no tides are possible, as the waters of the lakes, together with the earth rise and fall, and thus the tides at the coast are caused, while there are no tides on waters unconnected with the sea. Dr. Samuel Robotham also said, it is affirmed that the intensity of attraction increases with proximity, and vice versa. How, then, when the waters are drawn up by the moon from their bed, and away from the Earth's attraction, which at that greater distance from the center, is considerably diminished, while that of the moon is proportionately increased, is it possible that all the waters acted on should be prevented leaving the Earth, and flying away to the moon? If the moon has power of attraction sufficient to lift the waters of the Earth at all, even a single inch from their deepest receptacles, where the Earth's attraction is much the greater, there is nothing in the theory of attraction of gravitation to prevent her taking to herself all the waters which come within her influence. Let the smaller body once overcome the power of the larger, and the power of the smaller becomes greater than when it first operated, because the matter acted on is nearer to it. Proximity is greater, and therefore, power is greater. How then can the waters of the ocean immediately underneath the moon flow towards the shores, and so cause a flood tide? Water flows, it is said, through the law of gravity, or attraction of the Earth's center. Is it possible then, for the moon, having once overcome the power of the Earth, to let go her hold upon the waters, through the influence of a power which she has conquered, and which therefore is less than her own? The above and other difficulties which exist in connection with the explanation of the tides afforded by the Newtonian system have led many, including Sir Isaac Newton himself, to admit that such explanation is the least satisfactory portion of the theory of gravitation. Thus we have been carried forward, by the sheer force of evidence, to the conclusion that the tides of the sea do not arise from the attraction of the moon, but simply from the rising and falling of the floating earth in the waters of the great deep. That calmness, which is found to exist at the bottom of the great seas, could not be possible if the waters were alternately raised by the moon, and pulled down by the earth. David Wardlaw Scott also said, even Sir Isaac Newton himself confessed, that the explanation of the moon's action on the tides was the least satisfactory part of his theory of gravitation. This theory asserts that the larger object attracts the smaller, and the mass of the moon being reckoned as only 1/8 of that of the Earth, it follows that, if, by the presumed force of gravitation, the Earth revolves round the Sun, much more, for the same reason, should the moon do so likewise, instead of which that willful orb still continues to go round our world. Tides vary greatly in height, owing chiefly to the different configurations of the adjoining lands. At Chepstow, it rises to 60 feet, at Portishead to 50, while at Dublin Bay it is but 1–2, and at Wexford, only 5 feet. That the Earth itself has a slight tremulous motion, may be seen in the movement of the spirit level, even when fixed as steadily as possible, and that the sea has a fluctuation, may be witnessed by the oscillation of an anchored ship, in the calmest day of summer. By what means the tides are so regularly affected is at present only conjectured. Possibly, it may be by atmospheric pressure on the waters of the great deep, and perhaps, even the moon itself, as suggested by the late Dr. Robotham, may influence the atmosphere, increasing or diminishing its barometric pressure, and indirectly the rise and fall of the Earth in the waters. The Sun and Moon together create the tides. The biggest tides are, when the Sun and Moon are both above the horizon, and one near to the other. The combination of the Sun and Moon locations, most probably create electromagnetic currents. Tides only happen in the oceans, never in creeks, rivers or marshes. The ocean is made up of salt water, and salt is a conductor of electricity, and therefore has an EMF. Salt molecules are made of sodium ions, and chlorine ions, and an ion is an atom that has an electrical charge. Here's a sea temperature map upon the flat Earth. It's also possible this has a bearing on tides too. I've noticed that when the Sun is over, say the Atlantic, then it's low tide, and when the Moon is over the Atlantic it is high tide. In my research into electromagnetic energy is that the Sun is very energetic to humans, animals, and even gives food to plants by chlorophyll. And the Moon is the negative energy as it putrefies plants, etc. So in studying I've noticed, it may be affected by this dual positive-negative together, and they work in harmony with the ions in the water, and electromagnetic fields. When we look at tides on the flat Earth model, things make more sense.